Archbishop Naumann, great to talk to you again. How are you, sir?
Very good, Laura. Good to be with you and your listeners.
Okay, here's my first question to you. If indeed the Obama administration does what I think it's going to do here and try to stop the bleeding from the Catholic vote, which will inevitably happen if this is not turned around with this mandate for Catholic hospitals and Catholic universities. If they say, well, okay, we'll exempt you, but these mandates for sterilization and abortifacient drugs apply to every other employer who has even if they have a conscience problem, is that in the end going to be good enough for the Catholic bishops if the mandate continues for non-Catholic employers?
It's not good enough for me. I mean, everybody's conscience should be protected and everybody's religious freedom should be protected. So I don't think it should just apply to Catholics. It's not just a Catholic issue. Frankly, right now we're in a position where there are no exemptions to this at all, and yet it remains to be seen whether he'll grant it. Interestingly, the Kansas City Star today, who is not a friend of the church and not a friend of us on these issues, their editorial admits that this was a serious mistake by the administration. It says it's not an attack on religious liberty, which I think they're mistaken in that. But even a paper such as the Star is saying this was a serious mistake by the administration, and they need to correct it.
Well, thousands of Catholics, including many in the Kansas City area, at Mass on Sunday, heard homilies by priests who were encouraging them to speak out and stand up for religious liberty and stand up for the right of churches to define their own beliefs and exercise their own beliefs. And I think that in and of itself is very powerful and very positive, because all too often we Catholics hear homilies about amorphous social justice concepts, and it doesn't really connect to the core teachings of the church. And for myself, I'm heartened to hear that from Catholic priests.
Yeah, the administration was warned about how seriously the church took this issue, and it's almost inconceivable that they came back with really no effort to accommodate our concerns, and I've been heartened to see the unity of the bishops on this, and I think almost every bishop in the country has communicated with his people and asked priests to either to read a letter or preach about this, and so I think it's provoked a reaction within the church which itself is unprecedented.
I saw some folks on MSNBC this morning. I think it was Mika Brzezinski, who obviously has a direct line to the White House, and they were obviously talking on the phone about, we got to help us out here because people are misreading what we're doing. We just want to make sure that women have access to, quote, preventative care, and that it's just about women's health, and we're not trying to trample on everybody's freedom. So Mika Brzezinski, Catholic, was making that case on television today, saying, "Look, I think everybody's maybe misreading what the administration is really saying here." How do you respond to that?
Well, again, I think it's pretty difficult for me to conceive how the administration could not understand the consequence of what they're doing, and I think you have to look at this in a broader context. I mean, we saw the Justice Department of this administration try to interfere with religious hiring in a religious Lutheran school and be slapped down by the Supreme Court. We've seen them take away grants to Catholic agencies who are taking care of sex trafficking victims because of our convictions against abortion and contraception. So it's hard not to see this as an overall concerted effort to marginalize not just Catholics but people of faith in general. And I just think this administration has shown just a terrible insensitivity to religious freedom and freedom of conscience.
Well,
and
how
the
is
Congress,
it that... Go ahead.
Well, Well, I think the Congress has responsibility in this because they gave the administration a blank check to do this. They wrote a law that allowed the Department of Health and Human Services to make these definitions. And our objection, pregnancy is not a disease, and to say that this is preventive care, I think they did nothing for couples that suffer from infertility, but pregnancy, which is a healthy condition, fertility that's a healthy condition, they've defined now as a disease.
We're talking to Archbishop Joseph Naumann from Kansas City, and it was reported widely that you had personal conversations with Kathleen Sebelius leading up to key decisions when it came to this, the issue of abortion and speaking out for abortion rights and so forth. And lots of people who consider themselves faithful Catholics are very confused, Archbishop Naumann, about how people who can hold themselves out as Catholic can publicly make the case for issues like abortion rights, where the Catholic Church is clear that abortion is morally wrong and against the code of the Catholic Church. So how does Kathleen Sebelius remain a Catholic in good standing if, in fact, she does this and others like her?
Well, when Kathleen Sebelius was the governor here in Kansas, I had a dialogue that extended over more than a year with her about her long history of supporting legalized abortion. And at one point, I had written to her because I felt that her continuing to present herself for communion was a source of scandal because of the position she was taking. And she would, when she would veto pro-life legislation, she would identify herself as a Catholic and say, as a Catholic, I'm doing this. And when she did that, she began to usurp my role as the teacher of the faith and began to try to teach her own brand of Catholicism. And so I asked her, first of all, not publicly, but privately, to refrain from receiving communion. When she didn't abide by that, then I publicly asked her no longer to present herself for communion. And to my knowledge, she has not done so. Now, she doesn't, I'm not sure where her legal residence is anymore. Obviously, she lives, for the most part, in Washington, D.C.
So it's up to Whirl, I guess. No.
Well, it could be. She might live in Virginia, too, or Maryland. I'm not sure whose jurisdiction she's under, but...
That's very confusing, Archbishop, because, look, 56% of Catholics say they're in favor of contraception and have very liberal views towards social issues, yet the Church holds these views, and yet we have Catholics, Nancy Pelosi, and people go around and it's about abortion rights and redefining marriage, and non-Catholics kind of look at this and it's like, well, what does this mean? They're going up and getting communion, and they're speaking publicly against Church teachings. It's very confusing to people.
Yeah, and that's why I took the position I did with Kathleen Sebelius. And, I was disturbed by Nancy Pelosi's comments the other day saying that she stood with her fellow Catholics. Again, I think Nancy Pelosi is trying to promote her own brand of Catholicism. And within the Church, we don't vote on doctrine or dogmas. And I think this is the mistake that the administration made. They thought, because many Catholics, frankly, have dissented in their own practice with contraception, particularly, that they thought Catholics would not be upset by this. But I think even Catholics who don't understand the teaching still appreciate the right of the Church to teach it and to not be coerced to pay for something that the Church and those with authority in the Church for teaching find abhorrent and, as we understand it, intrinsically evil. So we have a lot of catechesis to do as bishops, and some years ago the bishops of the United States represented the Church's teaching on this matter in a document called Married Love and the Gift of Life. And I know it's one of the things that I feel as a bishop great obligation, and I think I think the tide is turning on Catholic understanding of this, of the people in the pews. But we've got a long way to go.
Archbishop Joseph Naumann, before we let you go, we're up against the clock here. I think many of us were concerned when the bishops initially proclaimed that health care was a human right, and it was if it's a human right, then universal right to health care, and we all needed that. Then how did the bishops not see that this was coming? I mean, the bishops in the end, were against Obamacare, but when you declare health care as a universal right, then you've got to see the government steps in, and as Santorum said, then they have the power.
Well, I think the bishops, we talked about it, everyone having access to quality health care is something that we feel as a nation we need to strive for. And so in that sense, I think that the church was eager to see how we can broaden the availability.
Quality is defined, though, Bishop. Quality is defined by the government. And end of life quality and preventative care quality. They start defining those terms. That's the problem. And I certainly understand your point, but that gives the government the power to define what quality means.
Well, my point is, though, that access doesn't mean that the government provides it.
I got you. I understand. So it could be a private deal as well, or it could be a free market solution. I understand what Archbishop Naumann is saying, and I hate to cut off an archbishop. It's really hard to do, but I have to. Hey, thank you so much. All right, you take care. Joseph Naumann, Archbishop of Kansas City.